right, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's Asylee benefits orientation held by the Asylee Outreach Project. Before we get started, I want to let you all know that we do have Spanish interpretation available today for you to listen to if you press on the interpretation button on the bottom of your screen. I'm going to go ahead and let the Spanish speakers in our audience know about this, and then we will get started. Hola y bienvenidos a esta orientación hecha por el Proyecto de Asistencia para Asilados de HIAS. La presentación de hoy se llevará a cabo en inglés, pero hay interpretación en español disponible. Entonces, si prefiere escuchar a esta presentación en español, por favor haga clic en la figura de un globo terráqueo al fondo de la pantalla donde dice interpretación y seleccione Spanish para español. Estas direcciones también están en el chat. All right, well, moving on to today's presentation, I'm Amy. I'm the Asylee Outreach Specialist at HIAS, and I am joined by our Senior Director for Legal and Asylum, Smita Dotso, and Smita is here to address any legal-oriented questions that you all may have during the presentation. Which brings me to this slide. If you would like to ask a question during the presentation, please do so by clicking on the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We definitely encourage questions and will address them during the question and answer session at the end of the presentation. Now, as an overview, today we will provide you with information on next steps following an asylum grant, the benefits available to asylees, and how to access these benefits, as well as a few additional pieces of information that asylees really should be aware of. And please feel free to take any pictures or screenshots of the information presented today, and of course, feel free to ask questions. All right, so let's begin with the documents that you were provided with when you received your asylum grant. These will be important to have as proof of asylum documents for, among other things, accessing benefits for asylees. So first, for those of you who received asylum through a USCIS asylum office, you should have received an asylum approval letter and a small card called a Form I-94 with an asylum stamp indicating your asylum was approved. And these two documents are your two proof of asylum documents. However, if you received asylum through an immigration court, this is going to look a little bit different. You should have received an order of the immigration judge, which is your proof of asylum document, but you likely did not receive a Form I-94 card. So in order to receive your I-94, you will need to contact USCIS at the number on your screen in order to schedule an InfoPass appointment at your local USCIS field office in order to obtain that card. And having your I-94 is very important to have as an additional proof of asylum document. And when you call USCIS, you will basically need to explain that you are a recently granted asylee and that you need to set up an appointment to get your I-94. And please be prepared to have your A number and order of the immigration judge in front of you, as they likely will ask you for this information. And in case it's useful, we do have an I-94 guide that walks you through all of the steps of setting up this appointment, which we will share out in an email to you all following this event. And please note that I will be including other important links I mentioned today, as well as these presentation slides in my follow-up email as well following this event. So if you miss one of these, no worries, just know you'll be able to see them in that email. Please remember that it is very important to take care of all of these documents. These documents help verify your asylum status, as well as the date that your asylum was granted, and you will need them in order to access benefits for asylees. They will also be important to have when you apply for permanent residency also often called a green card in the future. So please do not write on or laminate them. And it is very important to keep them in a safe place at home. Now, in the event that you ever happen to notice any sort of error on your I-94 card after receiving it, you would need to contact your local USCIS Asylum office by email in order to get that fixed. And you can search for the contact information of your local asylum office on the USCIS website in order to find that specific email that you would need to contact. So those are the documents you should have received when you received asylum. But what are those immediate next steps you should take now that you have asylum? So as mentioned before, for those who receive asylum through the immigration court and do not have their I-94, an important step is to obtain your I-94 by calling USCIS to make an appointment. But another important document that all asylees will need to obtain, whether you received asylum through an asylum office or an immigration court, if you have not already done so, is an unrestricted Social Security card. Now, having this unrestricted Social Security card will be important for accessing certain public benefits. And if you currently have a Social Security card and have not updated it, it likely lists a restriction such as valid for work only with DHS authorization, like the example in the upper picture. Now, this is a restricted Social Security card, so you will need to update to an unrestricted card that does not list a restriction like the one shown in the lower picture. So if you currently have a restricted Social Security card, or you don't have any Social Security card yet, you will need to make an appointment with your nearest Social Security office in order to get that updated. And in order to make that appointment, you have two options. You can either call the Social Security Administration's National 1-800 customer service number for help making an appointment with your specific nearest office, or you can visit the Social Security Administration's website, search your zip code to find the direct phone number of the local office nearest you. And either way, you would then call and explain that you need an appointment to update to an unrestricted card. Now, Social Security offices have been opening back up to walk-in appointments in the past few months. However, I would still highly suggest calling and making an appointment to visit your local Social Security office rather than just going to the office in person without an appointment. And when you go to this appointment, you should take a photo ID, such as an unexpired foreign passport or a driver's license or work permit, depending on what you have, your asylum approval letter or order of the immigration judge, as well as your I-94. Now, sometimes asylees do run into the situation where when they go to the Social Security office for their appointment, the employee there might not be familiar with asylum status or the documents that asylees can show in order to either update or get a new card. So to prevent this from happening, I actually recommend that asylees take a copy of the information that appears directly on the Social Security Administration's website that explains the documents that asylees can show to get a Social Security card. And specifically, I'm speaking about the part that appears on this slide under the refugees and asylees section. So hopefully that might be a useful tip for you in case you do run into any issues while going through your Social Security process. So next, you'll also want to apply for asylee benefits. As an asylee, you may be eligible for a variety of time-sensitive benefits and services funded by the U.S. Office of Refugee Resettlement through your local resettlement agency. So what sort of benefits and services might this include, and for how long would you be eligible for them? Well, the first of these benefits is free refugee health screenings or checkups, which are only available up to 3 months after an asylum grant. It is really important to take advantage of these free health screenings, not only for your personal health purposes, but also because it can help you complete some of the vaccine and medical record requirements for your future permanent residency application. Now, another pretty large benefit offered to eligible asylees is refugee cash assistance, which is available only up to 8 months after your asylum grant for those who received asylum before October 1st, 2021, or up to 12 months after your asylum grant for those who received asylum on or after October 1st, 2021. So for many of you, you may fit into that 12-month period. However, please note that there are income eligibility requirements to receive this cash assistance. So your eligibility for receiving cash assistance and the amount that you receive if eligible will depend upon your income and household size. Now, a third benefit available to asylees in the same 8-month or 12-month timeline, depending on when you received asylum, is a short-term health insurance program known as refugee medical assistance, which provides health insurance for asylees who are unable to access Medicaid. So for those of you who may be eligible for Medicaid, you will likely be applying for Medicaid instead, and I will be speaking more about that in a few minutes. And then finally, asylees may be eligible for a variety of refugee support services for up to 5 years after their asylum grant. And these include free English classes, job training programs, and employment support services, which can help you either find a job or find a better job if your current one is not a great fit. And finally, you may also qualify for case management services. So you may be asking, what is case management? That is a question I get pretty often. Case management can really include a whole host of things, but a few examples are things like helping you apply for food stamps or Medicaid, helping you find new housing if needed, applying for rental assistance you may be eligible for, among other supportive services. And for those of you who have professional degrees from another country that you're hoping to get evaluated, it might be helpful to know that resettlement agencies may offer degree evaluation services to help you gain recognition for that completed level of education. Now, after that 5-year period ends following an asylum grant, asylees would no longer be eligible for any benefits and services through their local resettlement agency. So as you can tell from the timeline I outlined, all of these benefits and services are really only available to you for a specific certain amount of time starting the day you receive your asylum grant. So I really want to emphasize that it is really important that as an asylee, you reach out to a resettlement office as soon as possible, or if you are an attorney or caseworker, that you let your client know of the existence of these and help connect them with resettlement services really as soon as possible following their asylum grant so that they can take full advantage of these services offered to them. Now, we know that some asylees may be concerned that accessing these benefits will have some sort of impact on their immigration status. So I want to be very clear that for asylees, there is no negative impact. Applying for and receiving benefits will not affect your asylum status, and it will also not affect your ability to apply for permanent residency or citizenship. So how do you access these benefits specifically for asylees? So if you are in Maryland, first of all, please reach out to us, the Asylee Outreach Project. We coordinate referrals to resettlement agencies and the state, and we can certainly help you access these benefits and other post-asylum grant information. Now, if you are in another state outside of Maryland, please directly contact a resettlement office near you as soon as possible to get started on enrolling in these benefits programs. If you're not sure where the resettlement office nearest you is, you can always visit the Department of Health and Human Services webpage, linked on the screen to see a comprehensive list of resettlement agencies in your state and in your area within your state. And when you contact one of these service providers, make sure you have your identification card as well as your proof of asylum document, which would either be your asylum approval letter, order of the immigration judge, or I-94. And don't worry if you have not yet updated your social security card before contacting them. You don't have to have an updated version in order to enroll in those programs through your local resettlement office. All right, so outside of these benefits and services offered by resettlement agencies, asylees may also be eligible for federal public benefit programs. And these are programs that are not only open to asylees and refugees, but the wider population in the United States as well. And here are a few common examples I wanted to highlight. One that I mentioned before is Medicaid, which provides health insurance coverage to low-income individuals and their families. And I'll be providing more information on how you might access that medical insurance on the next slide. Another example is temporary cash assistance programs that your family may be eligible for, such as TANF, which provides cash assistance specifically to low-income families, not individuals, and provides additional support like childcare assistance and employment services. Now, another very common example, which you might be interested in, is SNAP, also known as food stamps, which provides funds on a card similar to a debit card that can then be redeemed for basic food items at your local grocery store or retailer. And I want to be clear that receiving any of these federal benefits is not guaranteed, and instead it is dependent upon your income and household size. So it's not that everyone is guaranteed these when they apply for them. So how do you apply for these federal public benefits? Well, if you enroll in a resettlement agency, they will likely be able to help you apply for these as part of case management services that they offer to you. But if for whatever reason your resettlement agency is not able to help with this, you should also be able to apply directly through your local Department of Social Services. And specifically, if you're looking for help to apply for food stamps, oftentimes local nonprofits and large local food banks will have programs where they can help you apply for the food stamps, also called SNAP program. So let's talk a bit more about health insurance. As I mentioned, you and your family may qualify for a public medical assistance program known as Medicaid, which provides insurance coverage to low-income individuals and their families. For those of you who have children, there is actually another major medical benefits program known as CHIP. If your family is not eligible for Medicaid, but you are not also able to afford private insurance, your children may be eligible for CHIP, which provides low-cost health insurance to children in families that make too much income to qualify for Medicaid. So both of these medical insurance programs are administered by your specific state that you live in. So if you're currently looking to get health insurance right away, my best advice is to reach out to your state's health insurance marketplace. I would suggest reaching out even if you think you might not be eligible for federal programs like Medicaid, because they can help you get enrolled in additional subsidized and private insurance options that you might be eligible for. Now, most of you live in a state where there is a state health insurance marketplace that you can contact. In Maryland, for example, we have Maryland Health Connection. Up in New York, you all have New York State of Health. But if you want to find out whether your state has one of these, you can go to the healthcare.gov website for more information, as well as how to contact your state-specific health insurance marketplace. And if your state does not have a state health insurance marketplace, you would instead be able to apply for insurance directly through the healthcare.gov website. Now, moving on from benefits, as another next step, you will also want to apply for asylum status for your spouse and any unmarried children who are under 21 at the time of your asylum application. Please remember that you only have up until 2 years after your asylum grant to apply for them to join you in the United States as asylees. And then, just like you, your spouse and children would also be eligible for resettlement benefits and services for asylees upon arrival in the United States. So make sure that your spouse and children are also connected with a resettlement agency after receiving asylum status, as they would also be eligible for these benefits. And lastly, after 1 year of being physically present in the United States following your asylum grant, you may apply for legal permanent residency, often referred to as a green card. And then 5 years after the residency start date listed on your green card, you can apply for US citizenship. Now, an exception to this would be if you are married to a US citizen at the time that you are granted your green card, in which case you would be eligible to apply for citizenship after only 3 years. And with US citizenship comes things like the ability to vote, eligibility for certain government jobs, the ability to obtain a US passport, and in some cases, the ability to sponsor additional family members. So again, these are really the important dates that asylees need to know. You can apply for permanent residency 1 year after your asylum grant. Remember that you have that 2-year deadline to apply for asylum for your family members after your asylum grant. And finally, beginning 5 years after your residency start date, you can apply to become a US citizen. So now I'm going to move on to the last few pieces of information that we think is important for asylees to be aware of. First off, I want you all to know that you have the right to work as an asylee, because as an asylee, you have automatic work authorization that does not expire, regardless of whether or not you have an employment authorization document, also known as a work permit. So when you are filling out the I-9 form required by your employer, you would check the fourth option called Alien Authorized to Work, and you would write NA for not applicable as the expiration date for that, because asylee's work authorization does not expire. So again, as an asylee, you do not need a work permit to be authorized to work in the United States. That being said, many asylees do prefer to have one just because it can make getting documents such as a driver's license a bit easier when you have that additional form of photo identification. But you are not required to have one to legally work in the United States as an asylee. So if you do not have a employment authorization document or work permit, you would instead need to show your employer 3 items: a photo ID, your social security card, and your I-94. Now, if you do already have a work permit, you would only have to show your employer 2 items: your work permit and your social security card. And then finally, when you eventually receive permanent residency, you would only need to show 1 document, which is your residency card or green card. Okay, so we know that asylees have automatic work authorization regardless of whether they have a work permit. But what do you do if an employer who is not aware of this tells you you're not allowed to work? Now, even though all asylees are authorized to work in the United States, some employers may not understand that. And sadly, this is a situation that sometimes does happen to asylees. So first, I want you to know that if someone tells you they cannot hire you because you are not authorized to work, first of all, they are wrong. And know that there are several ways that you can help convince them that you are in fact authorized. So one option is if you are working with a case manager at a resettlement agency, they should be able to help you talk to your potential employer. Another option is you can show the Department of Justice's Right to Work flyer linked on screen to your employer, or you can call their free hotline directly for assistance. The number is also on the screen. So now let's shift over to talking about another document you may be planning to obtain, which is a driver's license or state ID. Now, the process to obtain a driver's license or another state identification card is different in every state. So to find out about the process in your state, you should visit the website of your state's motor vehicles department or agency to view the list of required documents, as well as to make an appointment. But generally speaking, required documents include, but are not necessarily limited to, Social Security number, proofs of residency, a proof of identity like a photo ID, and often your I-94. But even if you do not want or need a driver's license, your state's motor vehicles office does offer additional identification cards other than a driver's license for those of you who would like an additional photo identification form. Now, here are a few additional important things to know. First, you should be familiar with the United States Selective Service requirement. In the United States, all men aged 18 to 25 are required by law to register for the military selective service, though to be very clear, they will most likely never have to serve. Now, to complete this registration, you will need to go to the Selective Service website to register online, or to your local US Post Office to register in person. Now, if you fall within this category, please make sure to keep a copy of the proof of registration because you will need it to qualify for things like student loans and financial aid. And it's also really important to have for when you apply for citizenship. And another important thing is to remember to pay your taxes. Paying taxes is required by law, but it actually also benefits you as well, because by paying taxes, you might qualify for things like stimulus checks, tax credits, and tax refunds. And your tax documents would also be helpful to have as a proof of your income eligibility for different fee waivers. And if you do need help filing your taxes, the Internal Revenue Service, IRS, which is the US agency responsible for collecting taxes, offers free tax filing help for low-income taxpayers who qualify. And if you're interested in that, you can learn more on the irs.treasury.gov website. So on the subject of travel, if you travel outside of the United States, do not use your home country's passport. And instead, the best option for travel would be to apply ahead of time for a refugee travel document, which is valid for 1 year. And if you do use this, you will need to check with the country's consulate whether the destination accepts this document for entry. And also make sure to plan ahead because according to the USCIS website, I checked the other day, it does have quite a long processing time. It could even take around a year in some cases. And something that is very important to know is that visiting your home country can risk your asylum status, as well as hurt your chances of getting a green card or becoming a citizen. So we would really advise you not to travel to your home country. And this is because if you return to your home country, you do run the risk of the US government no longer thinking your case was genuine. So we certainly want to avoid that situation. And of course, you do not need any sort of travel document for domestic travel within the United States. Now, one final thing to be aware of is if you move, you must notify USCIS within 10 days. This is a mandatory requirement. and you must notify the US Post Office within 30 days to update your mail delivery address. And that's really important because USCIS will not necessarily forward mail to you, including receipt notices or even green cards, even if you've changed your address with the US Post Office. So make sure that if you move, you've changed your address with both USCIS and the US Post Office. And in addition, you should also notify your employer, your state's Office of Motor Vehicles, and the Resettlement or Social Services Agency helping you access services. So that's it for the presentation portion. If you'd like additional information on everything asylee benefits and post-asylum grant next steps, I would definitely encourage everyone to check out our website, asyleeoutreach.org. There is a page specifically for asylees and a page specifically for attorneys that provides all of this post-asylum grant information and more. And with that, we're going to open up to questions. I think we'll begin with some of the questions that I can see have already come in, but please keep them coming. As I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, my co-presenter is our legal director and an attorney, so she will be able to answer any legal related questions.
I answered a couple directly in the Q&A.
Okay, great.
But if some of those did not get answered in the way that you'd like, I would recommend that you just go ahead and ask them now. There is a question here that I did not fully understand, so I'm wondering if Janine can ask her question. If I need to travel in this time, may that affect to obtain my green card? Oh, sorry, no, not that one. The one that's open is what time exactly the document comes from notice till the mail. I am sorry, I didn't see exactly when you posted this question, so I'm not sure what you're referring to. If you can ask it now, we can try to answer it.
And while she's writing the question again, I can go over some other ones I saw here. Someone asked if we could repeat the time periods for cash assistance again. Absolutely, I can do that. So that will depend on when you received asylum. If you received asylum before October 1st, 2021, you'd be eligible for cash assistance up to 8 months after the asylum grant. However, if you received asylum on or after October 1st, 2021, that would be up to 12 months after your asylum grant.
Amy, someone is asking if you will be sharing out the PowerPoint after the presentation today.
Yes, for everyone who registered for this event, there will be a follow-up email coming your way with the slides for this, which will have all the links I spoke about, as well as other different resources we have here at the Asylee Outreach Project. So expect that email.
Another question about the travel document. How many months do you get if you apply now? So it depends on how long it takes to adjudicate. It's not that quick. I would compare it to potentially a work permit application, though a little bit faster. Usually you get a refugee travel document that is valid for 1 year. So if you think that you have multiple trips that you do need to take, you have a 1 year period to do so. And can you help me in that? At highest, we generally do not do loan refugee travel document applications, but there are a lot of providers depending on where you are located. I will put a link on the chat that can share information. Because this benefits orientation is offered nationwide, it's hard to know where attendees are physically located. I'll share a link to a great resource on how to find immigration attorneys near you, but that is a service that many resettlement agencies may also be able to provide. And Janine, if you do want to re-ask your question about when the notice comes in the mail, please feel free to go off mute or ask it. Sorry, you can ask it in the Q&A again.
Yeah, just so we have the question clarified so we can make sure we get you an answer.
In the meantime, there's a couple other questions that I'm seeing here, Amy. Do resettlement agencies offer rental assistance?
So that's a good question because I get that question quite a lot. And the answer is sort of yes or no, and it depends, because usually the way that they would be able to help you get rental assistance that you might be eligible for is through them helping you with the application of whatever rental assistance program exists in your state or specific county. So that's really going to depend on your county and state of location. So they may be able to help you apply for those through case management services. However, that could depend on the resettlement agency. Some may have certain funding for limited rental assistance, and that's really going to depend on the specific resettlement agency you enroll in. But for the most part, I think the main way they will help you is by helping you apply for your state and county's specific rental assistance programs. And outside of that, you can always use cash assistance that you might receive towards covering that rental cost.
Here's another question. When would I be able to request for my parents to join me when I become a permanent resident? So technically, unfortunately, green card holders cannot apply for their parents. You can't petition for your parents until you are a US citizen. So you would have to wait until you naturalize to be able to file for your parents.
I see Janine just sent another question in, which is a good one. So this person asks, how many months exactly can their wife and children come and join them in the United States after applying for them? So Smita, how long does that usually take, I suppose is the question.
Yeah, so it depends. It's a two-part process. The first part is a petition with USCIS. And that can take anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. And then the next part is at the consulate where your family is located. They would need to have an interview at the consulate, and they would come in with basically a visa for asylees. I am not sure about Egypt in particular. I don't have experience recently to know how long those cases are taking. In general, you can go to the USCIS website and you can look at current processing times based on the processing center where if you've already filed the I-730, you should see a USCIS address on your receipt notice. That's the benefit center where your petition is being processed. So you can actually go to the USCIS website and look at processing times for that specific form, for that specific processing time. That should give you a better idea. I hope that helps to answer the question. I see one more here. I received my asylum approval notice from USCIS months after asylum was actually granted. Could my eligibility date be when I received the notice, or would it have to be the date that they granted asylum? Yeah, this happens unfortunately quite a lot. There should be a date on your USCIS letter that has, or your court order. So if you got asylum at the court, even in those cases, sometimes you get a written decision that could be months after your hearing. But generally, there will be a date on both of those documents, on the USCIS letter or the immigration court order. And the date that is written on that letter is the official date the asylum was granted. So that is the date that that the clock starts for benefits and everything else. Unfortunately, it really is a shame when these agencies take a long time to get out the letter. But on the flip side, one of the benefits is, there is that more time has elapsed for you to be able to apply for your green card sooner. So that's one benefit, although I do understand that it can be frustrating if there is a delay. So for the person who wrote in the chat, Janine, I did include a link in the chat to a website where you can find immigration attorneys. I would suggest you click on that link if you need immigration assistance to help you find somebody located to near where you are.
Yeah, and that's a really great link if anyone else on this call is also, looking for free to low cost legal service providers. I use this link all the time to find legal service providers near different people, so it's very helpful. Well, I don't see any more questions. So with that, I will go on to our next slide, which is just to say, I want to thank you all for joining us today. I really hope the information was helpful. Our contact information is on the screen. If you can think of any additional questions later, I'd be happy to help the best I can. I will be sending a follow-up email, as I mentioned before, to everyone with the link to the recording of this slideshow, as well as additional materials and links from the Asylee Outreach Project. We do hold these orientations once every other month, so our next one will be in July. So please feel free to share that information with anyone who would benefit from them. Thank you again for listening, and I hope you all have a great rest of your week.